Now to the White House. Weijia Jiang joins us there. Weijia, it's been a very big week for the president. I'm sure many at the White House would regard it as historic in the biggest presidential sense. From your perspective and based on your conversations there, what are the big takeaways from the White House over the president's trip to Kyiv and in Warsaw?
Well, the White House has long argued, and certainly in the past week, that this is about far more than just Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that it's really setting a precedent for how the U.S. is a global leader when it comes to defending democracy and when it comes to fighting against autocracy. And so that is why they have put so much time, effort, and frankly, money into this war where there are no U.S. boots on the ground. That is exactly why the president made this top secret mission to Ukraine to send a message to its people, along with all the NATO allies and the people who live there, that the U.S. is not going anywhere and will stay there to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. So the White House views this as a huge success for the president's foreign policy and believes this will be part of his legacy because, again, they think it will set a mile marker for conflicts in the future and how the U.S. becomes involved, even without being directly involved when it comes to the military. And so the president is on his way now back to the U.S., where he faces some hot water for domestic issues that he is also trying to deal with.
Speaking of that, there is the ongoing situation in East Palestine, Ohio. There is not only a train derailment, but there are toxins. There's confusion about what the condition of the water is. Is it safe or it isn't? Who is in charge? Should the federal government have done more? Could it have done more? Did the governors ask for it? Does the White House feel like it's losing control of the optics and the actual facts on the ground in that situation?
I think it's hard for the White House to argue that this could have been handled better when it comes to the reaction. They've received a lot of criticism because Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg did not really respond. And tomorrow he is heading there, by the way, after days of being not as involved as the city would have liked. And also they're asking where President Biden is. The mayor of East Palestine, Trent Conaway, publicly said that it was a slap in the face for President Biden to go to Ukraine and offer up millions and millions of dollars to the people there while his constituents continue to suffer and try to make their way through this. So at the same time, the White House is pushing back, saying while they're dealing with the response, they're pointing the fingers at Republicans for failing to be proactive in this case. They're saying that Republicans are the ones in the Trump administration that dismantled policies that would have put more safety measures on trains, especially those carrying flammable liquids. They point to the fact that in 2021, a group of Republicans signed off on a proposal that would require fewer human inspections, that they've blocked other proposals that would have prevented these sorts of chemicals in drinking water to begin with. So they are trying to actively push back by saying, you know, this could have been prevented if Republicans had done their part. But I think when you talk to people there, as we've been reporting, you know, that's not really what they're concerned about there now. They're worried about what the administration is going to do to help them out of this disaster.
And Weijia, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it one of the talking points from the administration that in matters like this, under federal law and by understanding with the rail companies, they're the first line of defense in terms of cleanup and operation?
Yes, absolutely. That is their argument, and that is part of their defense. But, you know, that is one thing. But another, when it comes to the folks who are trying to deal with this, you know, having a presence there, you know, would have made a difference. We've heard that from leaders there. We've heard that from residents there, that, you know, even if they are not, you know, the sole people responsible, that certainly they feel like they have been left out in the cold, that there has not been enough of a response from the federal government.
Weijia Jiang on the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you so very much. In a rare